Lieutenant Morant, Captain Hunt was a particular friend of yours.
Yes. I was engaged to his sister in England.
So his death was very disturbing to you?
Well, it was more the way he died.
We're actually on a farm run by a fella called Carl, or it's a family farm. His grandfather and it would have been here. He's diversifying these bananas. He grows avocados. Of course, he tried his hand at macadamias as well. Everybody jumped on the macadamia wagon, but then it turned out that, as I said previously, the Chinese have grown them cheaper in other parts of Africa, and you know, they don't want macadamias anymore. But this is a magnificent farm. We met the farm cats, loved them. Saw some horses, loved them. Surprisingly haven't seen the dogs, but I'm sure he's got dogs. Do you want me to close that gate, John? Okay. So this is magnificent land. It's high on the Soutspannberg, and yeah, the farmer was a real character of the South African farm breed. He chased by a black mamba, and the cat took the mamba out. And I'm not quite sure where we're going.
For many generations.
Looking at this forest, these trees have long vines hanging down there.
That's all
gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm not going to lock the car, but we're going to
walk down there.
Yeah. And
you're going to execute me, are you?
Sorry, you want to close the window in case there's a. I think the rain is over, by the way.
Right. I feel like I'm being marched into the forest to be executed like Visser. I don't think so.
Not quite.
Shit. Not sure what we're going to see, but check this out, this forest. Massive trees with these vines. It's very eerie and spectral. There's the old foundations of a shed or something.
I think that was a sort of a nursery or whatever.
Wow.
There are pine, this is obviously
look at this.
pine and not malignant. And I think I'm almost at the stage where
Spiders.
they're talking about harvesting them, because there's a fair amount of usable timber here for scaffolding and
Right.
And even like kitchen furniture and stuff like that. We're going here.
Huh. What trees are these? Do you know?
It's pine.
Oh, they're a pine.
Pine. I don't know which.
They're so tall and straight.
I'm not too sure of the speed. Again, these things come in many different.
And the smell.
And yeah, you get that pine smell from the.
Everything is wet.
From the decay of the.
Wow. This is similar to the other format we saw.
Same format.
Wow.
And if one can say one murder is more callous than another one, then this one to me was one of the worst, I think.
And this will be on the back page of your printer.
Yes, all the text is there, the dates and everything are there, exactly as this is. 7 September, Rolf van Staden and his two sons were en route to Captain Taylor's quarters at Sweetwaters. This farm is Sweetwaters, and we'll go to Captain Taylor's place now. To obtain permission to take fever-ridden Chris, the little guy, to Elim Hospital. They had been to Elim and they'd been turned away. They'd been told to go and get a permit from the captain. They were met here by a Bushveldt carbineers patrol, which included Lieutenants Bregemerant, Hancock and Witten. Rolf Sr. and his eldest son, Rolf Jr., were ordered to dig the grave. Rolf Sr. was shot and Rolf Jr. ran away. They were shot. He was shot while he was in the grave. He was shot. Now Rolf Jr. was shot through the hips, dragged back and shot in the grave, thrown on top of his father's body. Chris had managed to climb out of the wagon and was holding onto a wheel, Trooper T. Botha, BVC, Botha being an Afrikaner, requested permission to shoot him and did so. The victims were Rolf van Staden Sr., or the father, Rolf Jr., 18 years old, and Chris was 12. And Chris was suffering from recurring malaria. According to, that's one of the very, very few remote bits of evidence that I have, because my grandfather, he was a magistrate in Petersburg, but he was also a member of the Sertmansburg Commando. But after the war, he went back to his profession as magistrate, and they were dealing with compensation that was paid out to the descendants of these victims. And apparently the sister, I'm not too sure whether the sister actually worked as a clerk in the magistrate's office, but she said that her father and brothers were just trying to keep out of the war, just trying to stay alive, and her youngest brother kept on getting this recurring malaria, as they call it, and that is what brought them here. So yeah, and on some of those compensation claim forms, my grandfather's signature is still visible, great-grandfather Kleinenberg. In my book, I can show you one.
Are you saying that was dug by the Boers before they were shot and thrown into it?
Yes, and you know, there have been all these accusations or allegations that the Boers had to dig their own graves. That is not so. There was a principal of this big school, this Lamana school that I pointed out, Dorothea Mollemalan, and Dorothea, her husband was principal, and she was a novelist, and she wrote 2 or 3 books, all in Afrikaans. One was called Die Donker Soutpansberg, The Dark Soutpansberg. The other one was called East of Durban River. We drove over Durban River just now. East of Durban River. The other one was called, I forget the other one. That are the ones that I know of, but they were novels. And she said that they had to dig their own graves. This is the only record that we have of them having to dig their own grave. And I'll tell you this I tell you this with hesitation, because one must be careful of making assumptions. This Rolf van Staden was 18. The guy who asked to shoot the youngster, Trooper Tianus Botha, he was Morant's Batman. He was about the same age, and Morant used him because he was also a local who spoke the local languages. Yeah. And I say this with great caution, and I ask the question. He, Trooper Botha, Tianus Botha, and Rolf van Staden could have been at school together in Petersburg.
They might have known each other.
They might have known each other. Why was there? Because there was apparently an altercation here. Why was there an altercation? Because Bill Wilmore, in his book, he says that this man here, this youngster, was worth any 5 troopers. I think 5 or 10, whatever he said. And I'm not sure whether he mentioned it in his bush on the Bushveldt carbineers or on Steineker's horse, but he mentioned van Staden as a feisty young man.
Right.
And this is the one place where we had a witness, and the witness appeared when the farm laborers when the landowner, that is Carl's grandfather, was notified that a government deputation would arrive here to verify that there was a grave here, and that they should please have all their labor, those who were here, have been here for a long time, they must have them here so that they can have a sort of a verbal thing of, people will agree that it was here or not. And they were all here, all the laborers. And when this delegation said, we want to know whether this was the real grave, they all pointed at a guy called Scotch Mahange. Mahange is a well-known family name here. And they said, ask him, he was here. Scotch Mahange was a youngster. And he heard that morning, this ox wagon creaking, and he came up here. Remember, there were no trees here then. He came up here, and there was this wagon here somewhere. And he asked if he could help. And the guys on the wagon said, they want to get to Captain Taylor's office, which is where we're going now. It's where we came in, that big gate down at the bottom there, where that guy in the uniform, it's down there. So he must have indicated where this was. While he was telling them where Captain Taylor's office was, they had to get a permit before they could get admission to hospital. Scotch Mahange said he heard horses, and he said the soldiers are coming, and he climbed into an acacia tree. Now, this place was full of acacia trees at that stage. There were no pine trees here. And he was the witness. I give him that title in my book, The Witness in the Acacia Tree. And he says he saw these two young men shouting. He heard them and saw them shouting at each other. And that is when his one of the officers called the guys with the spades, because they always had guys with picks and spades, black guys, and said, give the spades to these guys, they're going to dig their own grave. And while they were digging, according to Scotch, when the father was, this is what Pug told me, he said, my father, this is Carl's father talking of his grandfather, he said, my father said, when they were hip deep in the grave, a shot rang out and the father fell, and Roof Jr. jumped out and ran, and he was shot through the hips and he was dragged back. And Scotch Mahangia said, he said, if you take those bodies out, you'll see the one's legs are broken. Obviously,
you know, these two may have had a dispute about a girl or some money owed or something.
Exactly.
And
or the fact that one was working with the enemy.
Yeah.
Who knows? So that is what I have here. And as I say, I tell that story with caution.
But they were never charged with these. They seemingly, okay, you know.
They were charged with 13 counts of murder.
Oh, right.
Hancock and Morant. So yes, this has got the same detail on there as what we read on the other one.
Yeah.
Helden van Suid-Afrika vir Vaderland en Vryheid, and vir Vryheid, and the date.
Yeah.
For Vryheid and the
their
date.
names,
and their names. And
isn't there a photo in your book of somebody standing next to a rock and it says the men here were forced to dig their own graves?
Probably this one.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is the only account in my book of having to dig their own grave.
Okay. So this is.
So this was Van Staden's, and you know, this was it. And you'll read this in that chapter of my book, the Van Staden. It's I think it was a few days before, or a few days afterwards. I don't have these dates in my head, where they had these officers had been down at Elim for some other reason, and there they had joined in the tea and cake or whatever it was that was served after the funeral of the burial of Yesa. So you know, they just been to a burial, and I asked myself the question: did Hancock and Morant maybe not, but maybe Hancock had a son, 13-year-old, or knew, because we know that he had children because he still wrote from prison.
That's right.
That much, because Morant only became commanding officer after Captain Taylor had left.
Right.
He'd left the fort here, you know. Captain Taylor had gone back to. He'd already been sent home. So.
Real spooky here.
It wasn't miles and miles and miles away. It was right there.
So
now
we're just at the gate where we've left Captain Taylor's office, and we're looking over the road to a ridge where some trees are. That's the vicinity where Fort Edward was. But it's all been bulldozed now. It's not. It's all in a central area, all located around Elim. That was called Elim back then.
Called Elim back then, yes.
You can just see that, yeah. Okay.
Fort Edward. As I say, Bev and I were in Scotland when this wording was done. We've always have a bit of vandalism. There's less vandalism up there because I'm in the front of the languages. In fact, I think they've been having target practice with their bottles here as well.
So it says that.
But it says there, the base from where the Bushveldt carbineers Breakamrand launched their attacks on the Boer commandos. another Boer commando. There was not much action of attacks on the Boer commandos. They were shooting civilians and they were shooting guys who they thought might have been. That's in Afrikaans.
Yeah.
And then this was unveiled in April. You can't see that very clearly.
April 2001 by the Australian High Commissioner. Yeah.
His Excellency
G.M. Connolly. Yeah, right.
I wasn't here at the time. But here you can clearly see we are now here. This is where we are.
Yeah.
And that is where Rosbach is. Rosbach being Captain Shiel's house.
Yes.
Captain Shiel's house. So Magdalena Schiel, when she testified to say that he wasn't available, he had come from here, he had gone there. Now we don't have a scale here.
This is Hancock was supposedly having an affair with Mr. Shields.
Right, now there's Valdezia down that road where we've just come from.
Yeah.
Anglo-Boer War and Albacini, no war graves. Yeah, no, but there, anyway, Albacini is down there and Valdezia. And then here is Elam Hospital.
Yeah.
There's Elam Hospital, and what is written there?
Pioneer Graves.
Pioneer Graves, okay, we didn't go in there.
Yeah.
And then this is the road to the Truchard.
Yeah.
And then here is Ballymore, that's where we've just been. Ballymore.
Fitzgerald.
And Fitzgerald, right.
Yeah.
And here's their war graves there.
Yeah.
And then here's Sweetwater. No, we haven't been here, sorry, we haven't been to Ballymore. Ballymore is down in the valley. We can't get there. So there's Sweetwaters.
It's a hotel.
Yeah. The Sweetwaters, the Bristows were the owners at the time.
Yeah.
And Anglo-Boer war graves.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we are standing here, and there's Lovedale Park, Lovedale Farm. Yeah, Lovedale. This should be Lovedale Park Farm.
Yeah.
The Cooksleys, that's my great grandparents. And there's Pioneer and Anglo-Boer war graves. Now I'll tell you the Anglo-Boer war grave stones are here, the markers, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Where Heerser was presumably shot. He was on his way back to Petersburg, and he was shot somewhere here at Mahilaskop. We'll drive past Mahilaskop just now. And we've got a monument for him just beyond Mahilaskop at Flickenpon, which we'll go to his honor.
Okay.
So that's Petersburg via Bandeliakop. And then
where was that hotel, that was that missionary where he stopped in to see his friend with the...
that was down at Elam.
Yeah.
That was at Elam, where the Reverend Heerser went to see
That's right.
his, or rather to attend to the burial of the ceremony of Farmeyer, his friend Farmeyer.
Yeah.
And Ballymore, okay, there's not much here other than this. It was on this farm because there's a road from Elam. There's a road from Elam that cuts through here, and it was on that road, that crossroad, where those 8 Boers were shot.
Yeah, right. And in that film we see it's big open country, and there's sort of a gorge coming through, and the missionary, the old German mission, is singing to himself. He's in his carriage, his cake cart.
Yeah, but they show him as an old man. Heerser, I think Heerser was 37.
Oh, you're not old.
Yeah, no, that film is that old man with a big beard.
Yeah, right.
That film, I think a lot of it was done in the Free State, or where, I don't know.
South Australia.
Oh yes, of course, it wasn't even in South Africa. Yeah. Okay, this historical series in this area, Fort Edward, Fort Hendrina,
that's now in
something now in Truchard, and the site of
Boer Station, is it?
Of
BSAP Cemetery.
I can't read that one.
Looks like site of Boer
something station. I don't know. And then the cemetery.
Yeah,
which one? I don't know. Eagle's Grave we saw. Oh, Eagle's Grave is here.
Right.
And
unmarked
graves. Yeah,
old school.
Side of old school. That's all here. So we're going to walk up here, and then we're going to go up to the.
So the point being that we're at the vicinity of Fort Edward, is still called Fort Edward, this area, and it's all very central. It's all centred around Elam. All the events that we've been talking about today are around Elam, and in the magnificent background, I'm going to get a few of this, is they're called the Zoutpansberg.
Zoutpansberg.
Is that Sugar Mountains or something?
Salt.
Oh, Salt Mountains.
Because of the salt pans, which are to the west and on the other side of the mountain.
And these mountains stretch all the way around them, absolutely magnificent. There's towering gorges, and they're covered in thick, dense.
We've got the largest breeding colony of whiteback vultures down to the west.
Vultures?
largest.
Here you are, Charles. This is a bit of the old fort.
Yeah, could be. Huh?
Some graves. Are there people buried here?
No. What happened here was that these guys were initially buried at the back near the officers' mess,
Yeah.
which is further back. And when the fort was dismantled and moved to Louis Trichardt for the last time, an uncle of mine who lived down here at Fort Edward, Mene was his surname, he arranged for that fort to be dismantled and taken to Louis Trichardt. But then he took these headstones, he took them out of that cemetery and knocked them into our what is designated a pioneer cemetery where my family is buried. He knocked them in right behind my grandfather and my great-grandfather, who were all on the Boer side during the war. And I objected to this. I objected strongly. You can't really see. Can you see that? It says the mortal remains. If you get a little bit back, you'll get the you'll get away from the reflection.
Yeah.
The mortal remains of these soldiers were reinterred at the military cenotaph Polokwane, Petersburg, in the 60s by the BESL, the British Ex-Servicemen's League.
Right.
They came and they exhumed the mortal remains of these guys, and that is why these headstones were taken to our farm cemetery, which, as I say, I objected to because the guys buried there were all fighting against them.
Right, yeah.
And then I thought I was clever and I put them in chronological order, only to realize that the military, somebody had made a mistake, because one or two of these were actually in the wrong order. But that doesn't matter anyway. The information is on there. But here you can see, you see this here. You've got for King and Empire, sorry.
Yes.
Private Soden, and he was with the Petersburg Light Horse.
Ah, yeah.
He was with the Petersburg Light Horse, 1901. You see, so the Bushveldt carbineers were no longer listed, if I may use that word. It's not the right word. A listed unit. Bushveldt carbineers didn't exist anymore, technically speaking. That one there, he was a different unit.
Kitchener Scouts.
He was Kitchener's fighting scouts.
Yeah.
Their insignia was KFS, and the Boers called them Kitchener's Foul Stealers. That was their
That number, is that his enlistment number or his?
Yes, that's his regimental number, or his enlistment number.
Wow.
That's also 31st of 1901.
Yeah.
So we don't have any, in March 1901, 31st, we don't have any known action here. So he might have died at Elam Hospital, we don't know.
Might have been.
See, we don't have that information. And I didn't go to research one guy whose grave was here. It didn't have anything to do with Bushveldt problems. Here we have another one. This is the 2nd Wiltshire Regiment. 2nd Wiltshire Regiment, Rhyming.
Yeah.
And he was June 9th, 1901. So we're getting beyond the Anglo-Boer War period, really,
Right.
almost.
Yeah.
So again, it could have been an Elam Hospital death. We don't know that.
Was fever a problem around here with a
Malaria, yes, malaria was a huge problem. And once malaria went into blackwater fever, it could have been fatal if it was not attended to. And then here is Bushveldt Carbineers.
Yeah, there's
And
a
this is Van Buren. He is the guy who was shot by Hancock. He was shot somewhere in this area.
Oh.
And that's listed on that, yes. And it's on this board as well.
He's his Afrikaans name.
Yes, Van Buren is an Afrikaans name.
Right.
And he was shot because he, being an Afrikaner, he was seen talking to the mothers and daughters, mothers and children in what they call the bird cages, which was up the back here, where they were in a holding situation because they were awaiting transport to the concentration camp. He was seen talking to them, and he was at that where those 8 Boers were shot. Van Buren. And it was Hancock who, and Captain Taylor was also here at the time. They decided that this guy was going to cause problems for them. So they went up somewhere, I don't know, they said that there was Boer movement or Boer activity somewhere around here, and there were 2 of them and 4 of them. 2 were told by Hancock to take a right flank, and the other 2 were taken to take a left flank, and he was behind the guy who was with him. The guy who's with him might have been Muircherton, I'm not sure, it's listed in my book. And he said, Muircherton said, he heard a horse approaching. And he turned around, fearing the worst. And it was not the enemy, it was Hancock. Lieutenant Hancock was on the horse.
Right.
And then he sort of relaxed. And as he proceeded on his horse, he heard the shot. And when then he jumped off. And he saw Van Buren on the ground.
Right.
So that happened here, somewhere here. And then this guy, Rogers, was Bushveldt carbineers as well.
Yeah.
Rogers apparently took leave to go to the town of Louis Tricard, the remains of the town of Louis Tricard, the day before. That's what I found in Bill Wilmore's book. I think it was on the what is this date?
November the 3rd.
The 3rd. I think it was on the 1st or the 2nd of November. He took leave. There might have been others with him to go to the town of Louis Tricard, which you can see. You see that light shining. There's a light shining in front of that house. It looks green. Beyond that, you see those little bit of white. That's the town of Louis Tricard.
That's Louis Tricard, just in the distance there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So apparently on his way back, he was, I'm not sure what happened, whether he was shot by accident or what, but he died. So he was also originally buried here.
Was a lot of them down south had that enteric fever? Is that a factor up here?
I think that was a problem as well, and I can't say exactly.
So in honour of Anna.
So there we've got Afrikaans, English, Shangaan and Venda.
Right.
And here we've got everything that's on that distribution.
Known and unknown civilians who lost their lives in the Zoutpansberg Spelonken. Is that the English equivalent?
I'll tell you what Spelonken is in a moment.
A result of military operations of the British Imperial Forces during the Anglo-Boer War 1899 to 1902.
That Spelonken area is the valley down below here. And we always thought that Spelonken was connected to the word speleology, that it was a root of that. And people have always in the past said to me, Spelonken means caves, so where are the caves? And there are no caves down here that we know of. Then we had a Dutch guy with us a couple of years ago, and he said that in the Old Testament of the Dutch Bible, when somebody was banished to the wilderness, he was verbannen naar de Spelonken. So the Spelonken means wilderness. Those graves where I told you my ancestors from Scotland are buried, the Pittenrichs, on their grave is written there, born XYZ date, Achendoor, Scotland, died Spelonken. And they buried down there. Valdezia.
So you might want to read at your own leisure. These are the victims, and the dates are interesting because they're in a fairly short period of time, and I think that word got out that these guys were out of control and their activities were curtailed before it became too well known publicly. Because as Charles said, the Bushveldt carbineers were wound up and incorporated into another regiment or renamed, or
Petersburg Light Horse.
A Petersburg Light Horse. Sorry, I'm getting that's the missionary reverend.
The Reverend, yes, yes.
That
he was shot near Fliffenpon, which is where we're going to from here.
Now that Morant was acquitted of, wasn't he?
Morant wasn't charged with that one. It was initially charged, and it was later pinned onto Hancock. But together they were charged with 13 murders, so they covered most of this. In fact, if not all, they were. And this is the one that we've just been to. But this Ndebele driver, of course, we say he's unnamed in Ndebele. We found a grave that with a date that ties with this, and his name might have been Silas. We don't know.
And that is Visser, who was wounded in the ankle.
Yes.
And he was definitely executed on Morant's orders.
Yeah. There you are, it's written there below.
So July, so about 3 weeks. Oh no, hang on, I'm getting confused. Ignore that. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm not quite sure who's in this. Not quite sure who's here. Right. Goodness. There's these vicious thorns again.
So from here,
Oh wow.
from here, if you look beyond that washing,
Yeah.
if you look beyond the washing,
Yeah.
somewhere up on that rise, on the highest point, was the fort, and right next to it, we believe on the left-hand side, if we can see by the remains of buildings, was the officers' mess.
Right.
And then here, right here, was a little schoolroom. You can't, meaning it's now not the road has gone over it.
Yeah.
But my great-grandmother was very well disposed towards the police that were here after the war.
Yeah.
And she provided them with milk and with vegetables and all sorts of things, and she was often here. This is the one I wrote that little book on. He had nothing to do with the Bushveldt carbineers. He arrived from Canada, and they landed in Durban. I think it was Durban. Yeah, they landed at Durban 2 days after the signing of the peace treaty.
Yeah.
This Canadian vessel.
Right.
It was 2 days after the signing. And he joined the SAC, South African Constabulary, and later he stayed so long here that he eventually joined the Transvaal Police, and this was erected by officers, NCOs and men of the Transvaal Police.
Yeah.
So he had stayed longer than the SAC. There's somebody, is it this guy here, who was the SAC, I think. There's another one. Yeah, you see that's a black water fever in memory of Constable Kroch. Died of black water fever, contracted that is a phonetic fault. That's Shivas. It shouldn't be spelled like that at all. It's Sibasa, and he died in 1910.
Yes.
Okay, and this was erected by the Transvaal Police.
Yes.
So he was already out of the SAC. I think this one is SAC. I think one of these was SAC.
That is an agonising death.
Transvaal Police, you see.
The black
It was
water.
all after the military had moved out. This was Hamel. There's also a horrible phonetic spelling of drowned in the Nwaneri River. You don't spell Nwaneri like that at all.
Right.
3rd of March 1904, execution of his duty. Officers and NCOs of the Transvaal Police. So they were all Transvaal Police at that stage.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is an interesting little one over here.
Hang on. Oh, these things. Weird sort of branches or something. Look at that.
That is from the tree directly above you. It's commonly called a kippersol tree.
I'd call it the Medusa plant.
Oh, okay. True. Right.
And there's a little one here. So this is like a police grave.
You see, the police families lived with him in those days, particularly here. And this here,
There's a little one.
and in fact it was my Bev who pointed this out to me. She said, you know, it says here M and C Lawrence,
Yeah.
aged 3
Only 3.
years. Whether they were twins, I don't know, because look at the length of this grave.
Yeah, yeah.
They wouldn't have put one coffin on top of the other, so they were probably both buried here. Now, Lawrence, I've traced this entry to the old Elam Hospital admission register,
Yeah.
and it's very clearly written there that Lawrence, the Lawrence children were treated for malaria, but it doesn't say that they died there.
Yeah.
And Lawrence was one of the policemen that was here.
Ah.
And as I say, they lived with their parents here. So this is, but the question also that people ask me and I can't answer it is, why do those graves face, or the feet face to the north and this one faces to the east? Which is right and which is wrong? I can't go down that line because my knowledge of Christianity and all those things is not that good.
I'm also interested that they go out of their way to tell us on each of these what killed these men. Very rarely on a grave do you find out what killed them.
Well, Eagle was killed by injuries
From a lion.
He died of septicemia.
Yeah.
He'd been bitten in the early morning, and
Oh,
it was only on the 3rd day after that that he
yeah.
arrived at Elam Hospital. So
Yeah.
septicemia had already set in.
Oh, you know, when your cat scratches you,
Yeah, so
your hand gets infected.
little Shields House on the horizon, also somewhere in that direction there.
Right.
But you can't see
We're
it.
looking at the direction of the old fort. which is makes sense. You know, a fort's got the view of the valley and the town below it.
A nice situation.
Yeah, this thing.
This needs to be cleaned out again. Looks like some sort of
buds or something. Very lush and green here, but because of the rain, it's not at all. Does it get hot here?
Pardon?
Does it get hot?
It does.
I bet. Wow.